why not get 2 iguanas? And I was like, what? Okay. My mom was not thrilled about this, but we ended up coming home with 2 iguanas. I'm so passionate, and I hate to use the word passionate because it's thrown around a lot, kind of like the word awesome, but just being so focused and in love with what you do, that's what life is about. Welcome to my channel and join me as I video everything that I am passionate about, from reptiles to jet skis and basically anything in between. I'm Ashley with Method Noir Exotics, and this video is an introduction of why reptiles are such an important part of my life. Really, it's just, they're all so amazing and they all have different little personalities. And you know, if you're a reptile keeper, you understand, you know, kind of what I'm trying to communicate here is that they're just so, I think the word awesome is really overused, but reptiles interacting with me, other people at shows, and with, you know, their environments, it brings about awe, like seeing the natural creature just be itself. It is awesome. We'll start with the beginning, and then we'll get into the reptiles. So I grew up as an only child. My father was a canine police officer, so I always had dogs, aggressive dogs around, and they were basically my siblings. I grew up taking care of animals at a very, very early age. And because I was an only child, my parents put a lot of responsibility on me. So I learned to care for other living things at a very, very, very early age. I've always been interested in reptiles basically since my first memories of catching anoles outside on the house. I grew up in Texas. I've always been a Texas girl. I did live in Austin for a little while because I went to school at the University of Texas, earned a bachelor's degree in radio, television, and film. Because I was interested in media at the time, it had basically just started. I had always hosted videos on my own website, but when YouTube came in, I decided to open up my channel, which was Chicks with Tricks. And I remember the first videos that I posted were really RC videos and riding four-wheelers off-road. I've always been into motorsports. Started with the aerobatic airplanes, the radio-controlled airplanes, and videoing that. And in college, because I lived in Austin, I actually started, I learned how to ride a motorcycle in Austin, which was awesome because it's hill country. So I learned how to ride a motorcycle. I also got real deep into drifting, which is a Japanese motorsport where you take a rear-wheel drive car and you slide it sideways and you try to control it. So going back to the difficulty of raising, you know, certain reptiles, I've always been attracted to a challenge. Got into the jet skis and we dedicated our lives to it probably for the last 3 or 4 years. Because of health problems, I'm pushing away from the stand-up jet skis. I'm taking this time to put more effort and more time into developing Method Noir Exotics. So I went to school for video production and I actually wanted to work for Red Bull. When I was a freshman in college, I managed to land an internship with Red Bull for the Last Man Standing, which was a crazy off-road event that they no longer do. They flew me there, room and board, I had camera. At the time was, you know, so much better than anything I'd ever worked with, and it was amazing. I made so many great contacts, but because I really had interests in staying in Texas, I didn't want to expand to California and go work in the film industry. That really wasn't something that I was too interested in. Back then I was a lot shyer, and I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go in life. So I graduated at the top of my class in 2010, and after that I actually started my own business. Because drifting is a flashy, judged kind of sport, graphics were actually a really big part of it. So found a need and provided a product. So I started a vinyl business, which later came into also doing screen printing. I actually worked in landscaping for a year. I've always been a hard worker, but that manual labor, 12, 13, 14-hour days, in the Texas heat and the, you know, winter, which is very mild compared to a lot of places. But
cold. It is April 6th, April something. It's so cold. That's pretty cool. I love that tractor diesel smell.
But working outside, it gave me a certain perspective on work and be proud in anything that you do. Now, in 2019, I am a collision center parts supervisor, and I have a team of 4, including myself, so I guess a team of 3, and we do a hell of a job. We are an awesome team, And just like with my reptiles or my motorsports or my family life, I have to be attracted to that challenge. Bringing this all back to the reptiles and Method Noir Exotics, Method Noir Exotics is an absolute love of mine. It is a hobby business. It does not have to pay the bills. So I get to basically live a dream without having to worry about, you know, putting food on the table. So my reptiles are my joy, my pride and joy. I absolutely love them. I love working with them. It is very stressful sometimes to balance being a parts collision center supervisor that is a very demanding, long-hour job or career with being a hobby breeder. And you know, I don't breed these bearded dragons, but they're pets. So having pets and breeding reptiles and really trying to educate people about how amazing it can be to own reptiles. But I don't have to pay the bills with it. I am not trying to, you know, pump out, you know, as many animals as possible. I'm taking time and developing my projects slowly at the animal's pace. But on the flip side, having that career is just so demanding that in 9 years, or by the time I'm 40, I would love for Method Noir Exotics to be my main career. I would love for it to be what I do every day. And that's a lot of breeders and herpers' dream, you know, is to actually support your family with reptiles. It's going to be a slow process because I'm so interested in recessive genes, and that challenge of recessive genes, it takes many, many years to develop, and it still may not. While it is a goal and it is a dream of mine for Method Noir Exotics to be support my family and myself and itself and be profitable, I understand that it may not be. You know, there's a lot of responsibility and the animals have to come first. The big part of any meet and greet video is a question of how did you get into reptiles? I first had the opportunity to own my own reptile. I really wanted to get into monitors, and at that time when I was a kid, I was 7 years old. The Nile monitors were all wild caught. They really weren't very big in the pet trade, at least around where I was. I didn't have the internet, so all of my knowledge had to come from books. I was big into dinosaurs when I was a kid. So reptiles were modern dinosaurs, and I was just fascinated with them, and I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to, you know, own more than just, you know, the anoles that I caught outside the house. So when I was 7 years old, my parents said that when I was 8, as long as I did all the research and I was able to take care of the animal all by myself, you know, except for they buy the food and, you know, enclosure and stuff like that. I was a kid, so I didn't have any kind of income. I was 7. They said that they would get me an iguana, and I was thrilled. I was always interested in the biggest and baddest of anything, and iguanas were big. And of course, because I was a little kid, they were even bigger than they would be to you as an adult. So I was like, all right, yes. And I spent, that was probably 9 months, absolutely researching everything about iguanas. And when my birthday came around in December, my 8th birthday, I'd done all the research, and my parents said, okay, you've held up your part of the bargain, and we're going to let you get an iguana. So when we went to the pet store, my mother and father were there, and my dad was like, well, you know, being my dad, he was such a funny guy, why not get 2 iguanas? And I was like, what? Okay. My mom was not thrilled about this, but we ended up coming home with 2 iguanas, and one was Rex and one was Iggy. And I absolutely adored them. I became the iguana expert, or reptile expert in my neighborhood, and eventually was given a rescue, a very malnourished and, you know, aggressive iguana from a friend. And so that made 3 iguanas, and I cared for all these animals all by myself. Then my dad comes home in his police car holding a huge male iguana, and he was fully grown. I said, what's this? And he says, it's for you. I said, okay, this is random. He says, no, I was at, he was, you know, patrolling. He was, get out of there. He was a patrol officer at the time. He saw an iguana being chased by people with a stick. And he said, okay, this is weird. So he and a couple other officers actually chased this big iguana down, had to get him out of a tree. It was December, so the iguana was cold. And he ended up catching him, brought him home, and named him Lucky because we found him. So he was somebody's pet that either got away or they let him go. He was big, so back in the 90s, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just said, yeah, you know, I'll let him go. I don't really, iguanas are a dime a dozen, I'll just let him go. I was accepted to the University of Texas, and I moved out, so I went to Austin. And once I finally got out of a dorm, one of the first things that I did was rescue a about 3-year-old bearded dragon, and I named her Izzy. She was, once again, she was malnourished. She never had any UVB or anything like that, but she was just the sweetest little beard. Actually, she was a pretty big beard. Before I moved back to Houston, I ended up rescuing another bearded dragon, and that's Stella. She's my citrus. And then my last rescue bearded dragon is Chuki. And his name is Chuki because that is a type of 240SX. I actually picked up Chuki at a drift event. He was a rescue in a sense that somebody had a male and female bearded dragon, and they, of course, the female laid eggs and they hatched, and they didn't know what to do with these babies. And so he was also another nubtail one because one of his clutch mates bit it off. That's something that's fairly common. Especially if they're not, you know, taken care of properly. Always been interested in animals. I wanted to be a vet when I was younger, but I realized that working with sick animals and all the, you know, education that was required, that I didn't want to spend that much money on it to work with sick animals and people that really mistreat animals. A question I often get asked is, how did you get into breeding reptiles? I wanted to breed reptiles ever since I was a kid, and I was catching anoles outside on the house. But being responsible, I never had the time, space, or money to do it. And so after living in very small apartments for many years after college, my husband and I closed on a house in January of 2018. And at that point is when Method Noir was born. I decided that, you know, I was solid in my career and I had just bought a house, and once we got settled here, I started breeding the crested geckos. Why crested geckos? Because they do not require extra heat, they do not require a lot of space, and they don't have to have UVB. Really, crested geckos are an amazing pet for any beginning reptile enthusiast. And part of my theme of, you know, trying to show the general public, non-reptile keepers, how awesome they are, I figured that crested geckos would be a great way to enjoy breeding reptiles while also being able to educate people and get them into the hobby and let them, you know, grow their passion for animals. And while a lot of people recommend bearded dragons as a first reptile, the crested geckos are a little bit easier on somebody who's never dealt with a reptile. So I thought, you know, I love these little guys. They're so amazing. Each and every one of them has a cool personality, and their care is fairly minimal compared to the animals that I've cared for. You know, I started caring for iguanas when I was 8 years old. So, you know, my level of care may be, you know, a lot different than somebody else's, but overall crested geckos are a fairly easy animal to get into the reptile hobby with. So that goes into my Axanthic project really well. I get questions a lot about, why did you get into Axanthics? Why did you want to do this? Well, I've always loved black and white things. I had, you know, a border collie, my car's black, I love black motorcycles. I just think that monochromatic things are beautiful. I love black, gray, white, all the different shades. It's so, there's so much beauty in the monochromatic. When I was kind of looking at what I wanted to breed, lily whites were very popular then, and they were still very expensive when I first, you know, in 2018, early 2018, and I really thought about doing that, but the lilies, while they have the beautiful, like, white cream, they just weren't monochromatic enough for me. So I saw the Axanthics, and I said, absolutely, the ball pythons, I love Axanthic ball pythons, monitors, really anything. I said, this is my chance. This is my chance to work with something that I've dreamed with for forever, to combine my love of monochromatic with my love of reptiles and crested geckos. So I bought a couple hets. At this point, it was, you know, the internet, everybody was arguing that no, Axanthic is not real in crested geckos. They're polygenic, there's no recessive traits, there's no dominant traits. So I took a chance and I invested a lot of savings into these two hets and quite a few other geckos, very, very high-end geckos. because I wanted to start with quality animals and not just produce, you know, I don't want to do puppy mill. I want to produce animals that people will want and take care of, and produce 2 visual axanthics in the 2018 season. And I'm not gonna lie, I did cry. I started tearing up when my first one came out of the egg, and they did exist. Like, it's not that I doubted the validity of you know, people saying that it was real, but it was just such a chance to go on somebody else's word. And when it came out, you know, and I saw it in person, it wasn't just a picture on the internet, my heart filled with joy, and my tears, you know, just started falling, and it was just such a magical moment seeing that. And there's really nothing that could replace it. I always tell people, you know, axanthics are going for a lot of money, and I really wouldn't be upset if I never sold them, because they're just so beautiful. I love them, and that's really what any reptile keeper or animal keeper or breeder, you should love what you do. And that's one of my sayings, is do what you love what you do. And there's bad days, there's always bad days, but the good days are so good that it just keeps you going, and it just makes, I'm so passionate, and I hate to use the word passionate because it's thrown around a lot, kind of like the word awesome, but just being so focused and in love with what you do, that's what life is about. We need to enjoy life and not, you know, just be in the rat race of make money, eat food, go to bed, do it all over again, you know? You need to have joy in what you do, and breeding these reptiles, breeding these crested geckos, it absolutely brings me joy. And, you know, outside of breeding, just keeping reptiles brings me joy. But, you know, producing these beautiful visual axanthics and the potential and the challenge of these genes in crested geckos is just so awesome, because like I said, they're all such cool little creatures, and you can handle them, and they're widely accepted within, you know, the reptile hobby. So I feel like crested geckos are a great way for people to get into the reptile hobby, and that's what I want to do, is combine my love of, you know, the monochromatic and the beauty of them with the challenge of breeding and the education, bringing it to the public. Another common question I get is, what is your dream animal to work with? And hands down, water monitors. I absolutely love water monitors. This is a little bit of a sneak peek into what cool things I have coming. This is Dexter. He is a black dragon water monitor, and the reason I named him Dexter is because he loves to cut me up, and the short for that is Dex, which goes along with my Jax naming, and Pax, which is our puppy Doberman. We do like the X names. So this guy is, he's warming up to me. I've been working with him a lot. I'm going to have some really cool videos. Well, I've got some really cool videos in the work. I don't want to give too much away. Water monitors are the absolutely most amazing reptile I've worked with. They're so intelligent, interactive, that the challenge versus reward is definitely there. I really absolutely love working with these guys. So fascinating to be able to, you know, look at their eyes and kind of like see what they're thinking. And going back to the aggressive dogs, their body language, like water monitors are very, their body language is very easy to read, whether they're, you know, fearful or being aggressive. So working with them is a little dangerous, but compared to, you know, the other stuff that I've done, you know, like with backflipping or attempting to backflip jet skis, and dealing with, you know, I caught my dad's police dogs, his patrol police dogs, when and catching means you get up in the suit and they run at you and they bite on the suit, when I was 8 years old, you know. So I've always been respectful of animals, but I'm not afraid of them. And yes, I have been bitten. There's so much depth to them. They're a lot like cats, because, you know, some days they'll want to play with you, and some days they don't want anything to do with you. And that's another reason why I'm drawn to them, is just because you get to, they're dynamic. So yes, my dream animal to work with, and what I prefer to work with, are water monitors. Obviously, I have not been able to do that until now because I haven't had the space. Because you have to give these guys tons of space, they eat a lot, and there's a lot of responsibility. So these are definitely creatures that are not to just be bought on a whim. Like I said, they're very intelligent. You know, it's kind of like a parrot. Do not buy a parrot on a whim. But the expense of these guys kind of keeps people from doing that. Starting from a hatchling and raising one of these guys up is fascinating. And I hope to be documenting that more and more, and there definitely will be a lot more water monitor media coming in the future. Next question is, what is your dream animal to produce? Well, that's a multi-phase question. For crested geckos, probably my dream animal to produce is going to be a super stripe axanthic crested gecko. The reason I didn't go with lily white is almost equal or a close second. The super stripes are so clean and so beautiful that an axanthic super stripe I think will be so bold, like the fire up with the big bold white stripes down the dorsal, axanthic gene allowing for a black fire up. Oh, that's just axanthic super stripe, my dream crested gecko. You're right, and they're so soft. They're just so soft. You got little feet, your little cute feet. So this is Noir. He is my het axanthic male. Goodness gracious. You get good at catching them too, so that's another skill that you'll need to develop if you're going to breed or keep crested geckos. So the other part of that question that I need to answer, the multifold, is I do have a dream water monitor to produce, and it will be an axanthic black dragon. And some people say, well, isn't a black dragon black? If you're familiar with water monitors or Varanus salvators, the black dragons are not actually all black. Their bellies will have patterning, their tails, legs, it depends on how melanistic they are. But a black dragon, currently as they are not all black and white, or they do not have just monochromatic patterning. So, you're probably seeing where this is going. My dream animal to produce for the salvators is an axanthic black dragon. Okay, so now we're starting to kind of round up this video. So by the time that I am 40, I hope to not have to work for someone else, and I can work for myself and produce, things that I have put all of my heart and soul into. Currently, Method Noir is just a hobby business. It is not for money. Now, every, reptile breeder would love for at least their business to break even, and then someday potentially make a profit. So that's kind of, my goal. But I do not have to produce animals to put food on the table. I want to focus on educating people and bringing more people into the reptile hobby, because especially children, like kids are the future of our hobby, are the future of everything. So get them started young and start them off with being responsible. So that's one of the reasons why I got into the hissing cockroaches is actually I got them to be feeders, but I ended up liking them so much I just developed a colony and never fed them off. That's one of the reasons that I have the really cool hissing cockroach enclosures is I think it's a great first pet for young children. It teaches them responsibility without, the typical problem of if you get, your young kid an animal that they need to be take care of, a lot of times they'll lose interest and then the parent becomes responsible. Well, with the hissing cockroaches, they're so simple and cheap and so easy to take care of that it's really not a burden if the kid loses interest. But if they do learn to take care of it and be responsible for another living thing, that's a huge step forward, so they can move on to something more complex, like a crested gecko or, a bearded dragon or something like that, especially if the parents are, more familiar with reptiles. I want to get people, the non-herping community, interested in reptiles and exotics, because it's something that really enriches your life. And I try to convey that at my, my last show. It was some of the best, experiences that I've had interacting with people, having Freckles, my pied ball python, and having Stella, the rescue bearded dragon, is because people could interact with them and realize that, the stigma against reptiles and exotics and snakes especially, that they're not mean, they're not out to hurt you, they are just another creature living their lives, and they're beautiful, innocent, and just amazing, creatures to keep and have a part of your family. So that's my goal with Method Noir Exotics currently, is to, way down the line with my recessive projects, get it to support me. But if it doesn't, that's okay. I want to educate people, and that's what I want to do with this is my YouTube channel, is to really focus on documenting what it's like to live with so many creatures. My ZardHouse series, doing that is it really kind of behind the scenes, I guess. It may not be as well produced, but I really think that seeing the good and the bad is really important for people looking to get into the hobby, because not every day is good. You're going to have challenges and you're going to have bad days. So that series I really want to flesh out and do more of. It's just finding the time. Editing takes so long, as many of you already know. And on the flip side of that is documenting and educating people about reptiles and reptile care, and what it's like to go to a reptile expo, what it's like to vend, and really give people a look into living your life with exotic animals. So that's my goal with Method Noir Exotics. Of course, I want to develop the axanthic gene more deeply and work with more recessives, and try to really prove out some things. And with recessive projects, it will take years. So it's a long game. I would eventually down the line like to get a satellite building, not necessarily a storefront. A storefront would be great, but it's a lot more expensive. A satellite facility where I can, build huge enclosures and work with these animals without any space issues. Now this house, fortunately, is a very large house, so we have a lot to expand into, just my husband and I. And a dog and a lot of, reptiles, which you've seen in some of my ZardHouse series. Well, it's come to the end. I've talked a lot. You've maybe learned a lot. Maybe you've skipped through it. I don't know. But in closing, I really have to say a huge thanks to my husband for being so caring and understanding and supportive with this business endeavor. And this hobby. He's, a little bit of background on him. He not first met me, but one of our earliest memories of each other is in kindergarten. We grew up in the same area, actually went to the same schools, and lived, within a mile of each other, surprisingly enough. His first, memory of me is at recess in kindergarten. He was walking around the school and he saw a bunch of kids huddled around this weird girl with a peeing toad. And that weird girl turned out to be me. And he says, "Ew, what's wrong with this girl?" Well, many, many years later, he married me. And we have an amazing life together. But I really have to say a huge thanks to him. I do have to mention it because without him, none of this would have been possible. When we first met, the thought of breeding reptiles and having any reptile within his home, much less rats, which are now some of his favorite, within his home would be no way. But it's been a journey together, and now he's very supportive. We did our last show together, and it was just such a wonderful experience to work with people. Him doing that with me is just so special. And so if you're into reptiles and your loved one isn't, educate, 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 and they most likely will end up, being afraid of, starting from being afraid of these creatures or thinking that they're gross, to having, with my husband, roach enclosures on his desk and handling hissing cockroaches and having pet rats, and really enjoying learning about the reptiles and exotics and expanding his horizons. So, just understand that people have, people can be tentative, but it's part of my education that my husband was able to overcome that, and your loved ones or you or someone that can do that too. Reptiles are an amazing part of life, and the fact that he lets me live my dream and is becoming a part of it is very, very special. So always be thankful for your family and your friends and the animals that you care for, because without that, what is the purpose of life? But thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you stick around and keep an eye on some of my projects, and I hope to be posting videos more often. And I just want to say thanks for watching my videos and being a part of this journey that I am going through now, and I hope you follow along.